Hi, and welcome to Spiritual Alchemy, Energy, Transfigurations, the podcast. Tonight we have Laverne E.
Denyer.
Zarate. First of all, I want to give a big shout out to Matthew Embray and the Akashic Records girls that I had on my show a couple months ago. They recently have just been very helpful in getting connections to other people. And I want to just send out appreciation and gratitude for that. So tonight we've got Laverne with us. And let's start with your story. Your personal story and how you got into this woo-woo stuff.
I was born into this woo-woo stuff.
Right.
I really was. I didn't know that I was different until I was probably 7 or 8 years old. By 9, I really had an inkling that I was terrifying my parents because they didn't see the world the way I did. But I came into the world being able to see the spirits, interact with the spirits, do healing work. I tell a story of I used to give magic back rubs. And one time I remember my parents' living room with 5 people laying around on the floor who had come over to see me to get my magic back rub when I was 5 years old. They didn't come to see my parents. They came for my magic back rub. And so I was already doing my work back then, and I didn't know it. My parents would ask me to do it for them, and it just evolved from there. I did some things that terrified my parents. One of the things was I was visiting at my friend's house next door. We were, like I said, probably 7, 8 years old, and we wondered what the world looked like from the roof. Now, I was a bit of a tomboy, so I thought, well, we can just climb up. And then I thought, well, why should I do that? I can make stairs. So I made energy stairs leading up to the roof. And she and I walked up and stood on the roof. And then as we stepped off of the roof, I noticed my mother was in our backyard with her mouth agape, just panicked. And when we just walked down, then the stairs disappeared. And then my mother came over, gave me a few good swats and told me, don't ever do that again.
Oh, right.
We didn't know we were doing anything wrong. So that, and then at 9, my great grandmother would come and visit with me, play with me in my room. She'd been dead 20 years. I just thought she was a good friend. And finally one day she says, I've got a message for your daddy, because it was on my paternal side. I've got a message for your daddy that you need to go out and tell him. I don't remember what the message was. But I said, oh, okay, I can do that. And I went running out, Daddy, Grandma Mason has his message for you. And his eyes got big. My mother's eyes got big. They got quiet. And I went, what's wrong? How'd you hear that name? Well, she was in my room just now. What do you mean? She's been dead.
It's like, what's the big deal?
Almost 30 years. Well, what did she look like? And I described her in her favorite dress in which she had never been photographed. And then I gave him his message, and whatever it was, it shocked him. But that's when they told me to stop imagining things, and really got on my case, because that was kind of like the last straw. Oh, wow. So for 3 years, I tried to be a good girl and not live in that world. So lonely. It was so dark and lonely. So at 12 is when I went, nah, this is real. I'm going to investigate. So I started researching any way I could, seriously, from the age of 12 on. And I haven't stopped yet. Don't intend to.
And so you've got a lot of letters after your name. So tell us about your education.
um, well, yeah, the through first, I got to tell you, I was a high school dropout. Most people don't believe that when they see the letters, but because I had to go back and get my high school diploma. I didn't take the test. I went back, took all the extra classes, and then I got recruited into teaching at the school where I had the technical school I had gone to. I tried to close my business. Never really worked, but I tried, and I sent potential customers to the school, and they called and said, "Hey, you want to be a teacher?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it'd be nice, but I don't have the credentials." "Well, what if we send you to school and pay for it and pay for you while you teach? And that'll be your internship." And so for a year, I'll be with you in a minute, Miss Ellen. Where was I born? Nampa, Idaho? I don't care. When was I born? 1946. I'm 74 years old, guy, and I'm going strong. I don't mind. I'm proud of every minute of it and happy to be standing above. Grew up in San Jose and then moved up here above Sacramento in 77.
Wow.
But anyway, they paid for my teaching credential, and then I eventually went back and got my BA in psychology and religious studies with a minor in philosophy, which was originally a third major, but I dropped it. And then I developed in education, I helped 5 other teachers. We developed a master's program through CSU Sacramento that now has a waiting list of, the last I heard, 150 people at a time. We were the first cohort, and people from all over the world were coming to look at how we set it up. And then after that, I helped set up a second master's program in educational technology and curriculum, and in educational administration, tier 1 credential. And then I went through University of Metaphysics for my PhD, and then Universal Life because I liked the freedom. I got the psychological counselor through them.
Awesome.
And a few other things.
Awesome.
So that's what the PC means, is psychological counselor.
And then from there you went to work, or you're probably working all through this, but you've had some interesting jobs.
Yeah, I've worked since I was 7. My folks had a restaurant, and so I was working, doing everything that I could do, standing on a box to be able to wash dishes and waiting tables and stocking the beer, which now I don't think at that age you can even touch.
No.
But I did that, and at 14, I was a supervisor for one of those telephone places.
Telemarketing?
Yeah, I interviewed, hired, trained, monitored, did all the business stuff, and fired everybody at the age of 14.
Wow, impressive.
And, I've just gone on. I'm director for Campfire, director of a holistic education group. I'm just a drafter for about 40 years, tax preparer, bookkeeper.
So how'd you find your way from doing all of that into helping people with nasties?
Well, I've always done this as a sideline, and in 1970 is when I started doing readings and counseling for people professionally. And then I guess it was in the late 80s is when it wasn't my first encounter, but the first person that came to me that wanted to get out of a satanic black witchcraft group. And when we tried to get her away, I was attacked by a demon while I was driving. We have a life force here. Yep, you too.
Was this in your book? Was this in the book?
It may have been. I don't know. That was Bossed the Beast. That was the story in here. And the picture on the cover, that's what she looked like. That's what the demon, well, I'm trying to focus backwards.
Right.
That's pretty much what she looked like. And so I was driving from Reading back to Yuba City. At about 2:30 in the morning, I had done a week-long seminar on reincarnation. And when she appeared in front of the windshield and said, "She's mine, you can't have her, and you're going to die." And so I put my body into autopilot, and we had a little battle, and she finally went away, and I pulled off in Chico, had a cup of coffee, and drove home. It was a little more than that, but it was interesting. I knew my body was driving along on the freeway, doing its best to take care of keeping me safe, while I was having this really intense battle, just like you see in the movies. And that was my client that I was working with. You could hear her scream every once in a while when the demon would go back and claw her or do something to her. And I talked to her the next day, and she said she had never felt so free in her life. And a year later, she was fine. I talked to her again, then I haven't heard from her since.
That's a great story.
It was.
It still is.
It's like, what just happened? Because this was the time of the Amity House. When that movie was out. This was right or just after this, and I had seen the pictures in there, and she was very much like it. I don't remember which came first, but it was right about that same time, and I went, that's real. But yeah, the things in Hollywood are often very real. I see a lot of things that, they're woogie beyond even me, but with all the experiences I've had with aliens, with ghosts, with demons, with lost souls, with possessions, you name it, a lot of it's more real than people like to think. Most mythology comes from something where there was some truth. And then it gets changed over time as people talk about it and try to interpret it. But a lot of it really is true.
I'm sure a lot of our viewers haven't read your book, but could you take us, like, we're going with you to battle some demons like you did in the book with some students?
Oh, yes. One of my majors was religious studies, and my mentor professor was just George Williams, just absolutely a phenomenal teacher, and he understood. And he taught Secrets of the Sacred or something of that sort, and it was about all the different sacred philosophies around the world. And so I had an opportunity to have discussions in class and with him. And he had a friend, a couple that had purchased a church that they turned into a restaurant and bar. And the congregation was really split over whether to sell it or not. It's right near the college. And half the congregation said, don't sell it, don't sell it, don't sell it. And the other said, we're selling it and getting something better because, this really needs work. And so there was a lot of hard, heavy energy there. Besides which, it was right across the street from a funeral parlor where they had really botched a lot of funerals. And so the church had this huge air conditioning duct out behind it, and it was like a freeway tunnel. There were probably 300 different entities that were in there that were angry that these people had come in and were destroying their place and their sacred place. And then the outside entities were the ones that didn't want it sold in the first place and thought it was sacrilegious, although the people did a beautiful, very respectful job of keeping it intact. And so the couple, they had a couple of serious car wrecks that almost killed the wife. They had several things that went on. And he said, will you go in and check it out? Because he already had a clue who I was. And he says, and by the way, can we take anyone that wants to go from the class? And so we offered, and there were about 20 of the students that wanted to go. So I was watching out for them and teaching and releasing the poor lost souls at the same time and putting a lot of protection out. So we started outside, worked in, and it was clean when we left, but they weren't happy at first that we were in there to cause that trouble.
Right. There was peace at the end of that story. Amen. That you go in and you're cloaked, and you go in with sage and bells and crosses and
yep.
And
I took popsicle sticks and made probably about 30 or so, I don't remember how many, crosses, and blessed them with holy water. And we put all those around outside before we even went in. And including in the water system, because the underground water, feed and sewer and electrical, those are wonderful conduits to get into a piece of property.
Right.
So we had to do that first.
Yeah.
We learned a lot, and in our following class, we talked about it, and they said, well, we didn't know what we were facing when we were going in, but we learned a lot and learned that there really is good in the world.
Yeah,
and that's really what all my stories are.
And there's real evil in the world too.
Absolute.
So my favorite stories out of the book was A House of Joy and The Last Goodbye.
Yeah. The House of Joy was a little boy that had his parent. It was in the Wild West times, and he was on a farm, and his parents had gone to town for provisions and never came back. They eventually found them. They had had an accident, fallen into a ditch, and they were hurt so severely they died. But he and his dog were the only ones that were left. And so he just finally sat down by the well when he couldn't take it. His cattle had died and everything, and they just finally sat down by the well and quit. And the dog quit with him, stayed with him. Along I come in the 1900s, excuse me, and my friend called and said, my friend needs some help. We need to know what's going on. And I said, well, can you tell me? No, you have to see it. I'm not going to tell you. And we have to be there early in the morning so that you can see the whole thing. So I was there about 6:45, met my friend and met the woman that lived in the apartment and walked in. She had the old shag rug, and the whole floor was like somebody had taken their fingers and written in it, joy. joy in every kind of script, in every kind of style, upside, backwards, turned around. The whole carpet in the living room was filled with the word joy. And they would wake up a couple times a week with that. Tried to blame their little son, who was about 4, and he didn't have a clue how to do it. And it was nice and clean when they went to bed, so they figured he couldn't stay up and do that all night. Tried to think that the husband was pulling a trick on her, and that didn't work. Couldn't figure that out. And so I came in and I found the little boy and his dog. And they had been there all that time, and that was a new apartment building. There had been a couple that had moved into, that particular apartment, and they had only stayed a month because it scared them away. And every once in a while, he'd rattle things in the kitchen, open and slam the doors, throw utensils across the room, anything he could to try to get attention. He never hurt anybody, but he couldn't figure out why they wouldn't talk to him, why the little children wouldn't play with him. And so I worked with him and kind of had to chase him around the house a little bit, like you do with little kids, kind of totter around with him and the dog playing. I finally got him to settle down in a corner of the hallway, and he showed me his story. He told it, and he put the pictures in my head, so I knew it all. And he explained what had happened, and so I brought in an angel, and I said, "Would you like to go with this nice angel and go home?" And he says, "Not unless my dog can go." And so the angel said, "Yeah, the dog could go." And so he left, and there was never a problem afterwards. How do my past life regressions affect me now? How to interpret? I either go into an altered state and look to see what the issue is, depending on what the person's asking. I worked with someone this afternoon, but I prefer to do guided meditations because then the individuals actually interact with that lifetime and review it at the end and figure out what they've learned, what they still want to learn, and then talk to the present soul, and they come to an understanding to know why certain things are happening in the current time. And it's so much more powerful than just hearing about a lifetime. It's about a 2-hour process. I hope that answered his question.
Since he asked that question, how about we talk about life between lives and determining the next lifetime?
Yeah, it's a fascinating process. As I say, I've gone through it myself. I've taught people how to help me get there to look at it, or done it in meditations, and I do it with all my clients, where they go to the happiest time in a lifetime, the most challenging, and a few other things, and then they actually either watch or go through the death cycle. And I decide at the moment which is best for my client doing that. And then we review what did they learn? What were their regrets? What were their great joys? And then the soul goes through a little bit of rest, depending on what their interpretation would be. I don't know if you ever read Tuesday Lomsang Rampa. I think it was in the 70s. He was a Tibetan monk, and one of the books he wrote was 3 Lives. And it was about 3 different people that had preconceived notions of what happened after death. One, it was just dark nothingness, and the being kind of came awake and couldn't move, couldn't see anything. It's going, is this what it's going to be like forever? And suddenly he heard noises and caught a glimpse of light and realized he had put himself in a coffin. And because that's what he expected, and it was dark, so when he opened it, then he got to move on. Another one, sorry about that, went to what he perceived as the Elysium fields with the God up on the throne and all the angels just, yeah. And he said it was wonderful until he heard that the wings were starting to creak, the feathers were starting to fall off, and it was a setting that was there for him because that's what he expected. And once he got tired of it and said, "Is that all there is?" His guide came and says, "Are you ready to really do some work now?" So he had 3 different lifetimes of people's expectations. And then once they got past the expectations, they could rest. The soul rests a little bit and kind of thinks. Then you go into a review process of this lifetime, whatever lessons you brought from other lifetimes, what you would like to learn, what you would like to learn how not to do, which is equally important, or what you would like to reinforce so that you know that it really is your aha, your real true truth. And you go through that review, and then you start thinking about, well, what do I want next? And a lot of it is your own work, but you have teachers, beings, your guides who are there to kind of help you look at things to determine, well, what are you going to do in the next lifetime? Or do you even want to do a next lifetime? And you determine time, space, dimension, familial contacts, culture, economic, health issues, everything. You put it together like this giant jigsaw puzzle from whichever lifetimes you want to take the learning from, and make a decision what you want. And then your guides help you find a family. Yeah, I know the real work. The family, then you search for who do you want to be, your parents, your siblings, your other relatives, the people and environment that you're most likely to be in the first 18 to 20 years of your life. And what those probabilities are to help you learn whatever lessons you want. And it's absolute choice. And so you make a covenant with your parents. This is what I want to learn from you and what I'm willing to teach you. And they say the same thing in return. And you make a contract. And then you actually walk with the mother in spirit for about 2 earth years before you're born. And then you decide the time, the space, the name. People, I just was recently talking to someone. Well, I didn't want to give my son that name, and he's stuck with it. And I said, no, he's not stuck with it. That's what he wanted it to be all along for the numerological aspect and everything else. So just deal with it. Know that that's his legal name, and you can give him any nickname you want. Just let him be, because that's what he chose. She went, oh. And so you make all those contracts and those covenants, and then you're in and out of the body while it's in the womb. You're in and out of the body for about the first 2 years until the soft spot closes. And then you've got up until about the 2nd or 3rd year to leave also, if it isn't turning out to be what you want. So whatever family and situation you've started in, it was there to teach you and for you to teach others. It's part of your contract. When you come to peace with that, there is such joy. When I realized that, and I went, I wouldn't be who I am if I didn't have the parents I did. Thank you, and thank me. That's what I had to learn.
Are we able to change those contracts during our lifetime?
Well, there's always choices. we come in to learn things, and if we get real stubborn, put our feet down and say no, or I want to do that instead, we've got that choice, and then we'll probably wind up in another lifetime making a similar contract. We might as well do it now.
Dear
But
Lord.
along the way, that's the probabilities of the first 18 to 20 years, and then after that, we're on our own. We've got our guidance, we've got our soul wisdom, we've got memories, urgings, all of those things that we set in place to set us on this life path. But every moment's a choice.
Right. We got free will. Yeah. I got a big contract.
Yeah. Well, having started out with the only child of older parents who were both alcoholics and worked about 18-hour days, I pretty much raised myself. So when I wasn't being put down or slapped around or having to deal with them arguing, I had to learn how to take care of myself. And I wouldn't have done that had they not been that way.
Right, exactly.
And when I got out of victimhood, it's like, wow, what I learned. Thank you. You did exactly what I asked you to do.
Okay. I knew he was going to ask. Let's talk ghosts and demons. I know you're a badass, Laverne. You're not afraid of anything.
No, I'm really not. Oh,
So,
yeah.
what's the scariest demon or ghost that you've had to deal with? Are they human?
Probably when I was about 22. I'm going to back up. When I was young, I had lucid dreams. And I got curious during the daytime, is there really a hell? Because everybody talking religion, you're going to go to hell if you do that and everything. So I went, oh, what's hell like? And so in my dreams, I would actually astral travel and walk through the hell realms. And I would encounter beings that would try to hurt me. And I said, you can't hurt me. And I would interact with them. And so I think it was a type of pre-training.
Mm-hmm.
So that when that actually came into my life, it's like, oh, here we go again. They can't hurt me.
Mm-hmm.
They can cause problems, but they really can't hurt me unless I let them. But when I was about 22, 23, something like that, I was a campfire leader, and one of my little girls said, there's a ghost in our house. And so I went over, and it wasn't a ghost, it was a demon. And I was kind of inexperienced, and it was probably one of the real baddies. And when I walked down the hall, it said, leave now or I will kill you. And I flat out believed it and left. A few years later, I wouldn't have left, but at that point in my experience, I left. And I knew I wasn't ready. But one was a 14-year-old boy that was a walk-in, and it wasn't a voluntary walk-in, it was a battle. He was a demon sent from the hell realms by one of the biblical demons, whose name I fortunately don't remember. And he was recruiting students from the high school where I was teaching to go to his Church of Satan. One of the boys that he was recruiting was one of my students who knew what I did, because I used to get to teach this as a volunteer at lunchtime. I taught techniques of the sacred. All kinds of people went. No, the Bost was the only name that I allow myself to remember, because I choose not to give them energy. But that demon at the time, this boy was brought in, and he had cast out, killed the boy that was in the 14-year-old body, and he was blinded overnight. He went to bed fine and woke up blind in one eye. And he was brought in to me, and at first he couldn't even come into the classroom because I had set the stage and there was just a little tiny tunnel that allowed him access, and he knew he couldn't come past it. And we had a discussion, and he says, I was sent here by my master to kill 5 people. I've already killed 3. 2 of them were babies because they would interfere with his plans. And I said, I know who your master is. He said, nobody knows my master, doesn't know his name. And I named him. And his eyes got big, and he says, well, you need to stay away from me, or I'm going to kill you if you don't stay away. I'm here to kill 5. Do you want me to make it 6? And I said, just go ahead and try. And he did try, and wasn't happy with the results, and left town the next day. So
That's in the book.
yeah, that one's in the book. And so that was pretty strong. You know, after a while, it's just like most of them don't have anywhere near the power they think they do.
Right. There's a question. Is there a difference between a demon in one aspect versus a god in another religion that is pagan?
Okay, first I'm going to ask, what do you think pagan means? Before I even answer the question.
Anything other than God, I would assume in this case.
It's anybody who believes different than what your religious belief is. The Jews saw everybody else as pagans. The Christians saw everybody else as pagans. You know, pagan means you believe maybe as much and more. And so pagan is an interesting term. And difference between a demon in one aspect, I think it's opinion and experience. Evil is evil. And when you encounter it, if you're at all aware, you recognize it for evil, and you either decide it works for you because you can get fairly quick rewards, or you say, no, I don't accept that. But the monotheistic religions, such as Christianity or Judaism, anything that is not Christ, God, or the angels is considered bad. Sometimes just bad, sometimes flat out evil. I've been told many times how evil I am and how I'm going to hell. And I went, oh, I've been there. Okay. But where others, like the Shinto religion that I'm really fascinated by, there's God in the trees and the land and the elements and everywhere. And so they wouldn't see anything as negative. So that's what I was meaning by perspective. It depends on the training you've come from, the philosophy that you choose to understand and believe, which again is in large part based on choices we make before we're born. And so, yeah, I've been told I'm really some spawn of the devil by any number of people. And so, yeah, when the work that I was a sort of unofficial Wiccan for about 4 or 5 years, and participated with a lot of their ceremonies and a lot of their beliefs, and have a lot of the Native American traditions that I understand and go along with. And so I can I can see the blending. It's the same concept with a different name, and if it doesn't have the same name as mine, that's bad. So, as belief in many gods, no. If you look it up, the terminology is when the Jews would call you pagan if you believed in the earth religions. Christians would call you pagan if you were Wiccan, or if you were, excuse me, Islam or any of the others. Monotheistic does believe in one God, and polytheism is more than one God. That's that differentiation, but it's not the definition between paganism.
Okay. Any other demon stories that scared the bejesus out of you?
Geez.
That didn't make it into the book.
My goodness, there are so many. Did I put the story about up in Howling Creek in this book or someplace else?
Was that where the gunfighters or
the gold miners' town? Yeah,
the robbers. That
yeah. When I first came across those witches, that was unusual, but I'd say the most was when I was young, and I trained myself to not be afraid of them, and so they don't frighten me. When I went to Alcatraz, we were lucky. We were there. It was a really light crowd, and we happened to wander off, and we met one of the caretakers, one of the ombudsmen, and he said, "Would you like to see downstairs?" And well, knowing me, of course, and he took us all through, and I gave him my impression, and he read back to me, "Oh, this is what the history says," and it was matching what I was saying. But there were two places where there were some big, clawed, pretty ugly demons, and I told him, "You really don't belong here anymore. You really can go home." And so I opened a portal, and they weren't happy, but I said, "You're going home anyway." And so they went through the portal, I closed it, and that part of what's haunting the area down beneath Alcatraz was cleared. But the ombudsman said, "Oh, that's why nobody likes to go into that part of the underground caverns." It was because of those two demons that had been locked away there by some magician that had been a prisoner during the Civil War time. And, they at first, because I was only looking for ghosts and to see that energy, and then I saw them, the glowing eyes and the claws and the teeth and the big scary aspect. It startled me. And then I went, "You're stuck." And I kind of had compassion for them and sent them back to the realm where they belonged. But that was interesting. And I was able to go through and give a lot of history confirmation to the ombudsman, including when the Native Americans had taken it over. And I told him a couple stories of like the fights that they had and different things. And he took me over and he says, "Follow me." And he showed me a few spots on the wall where there were blood stains, exactly where I told him, "Well, this is what happened. And this guy hit his head there." And so he was kind of having a good time getting that kind of feedback. So it was interesting.
Oh, I'm sure. I love getting validation when I pick something up.
Yeah, have you heard of the Serpent Mound in Ohio?
No, I haven't.
It is a huge, it's, the ground is mounded up about 5 or 6 feet, and it's, I think, 7 or 8 feet wide. And it is the shape of a serpent. And then at the mouth of kind of curving, and it's up on a cliff. And where the mouth opens, there's like a big egg that, like the serpent is trying to engulf. And I went there with a friend, and a third friend joined us. And I'm dowsing because I do body dowsing. I don't need the instruments. I use them for fun, but I don't need them. And I'm dowsing, and we're looking at what all the different things were. And the conclusion that we came to is that the four of us, including the guard that was there, the groundsman, ombudsman, whatever he was, that he had been there at the time when the mounds were made. And we had a portal from Lemuria to come forward and help the natives build the Serpent Mound. And I was water. My friend was air. The third person that joined us was earth. I'm sorry about the coughing.
That's okay.
I've got
You have some water?
No, I've got some food caught from dinner, and it's just not going away. And then the gentleman that was there was fire. And so we each had our different elements that we put together when we were doing that. And my friend that was earth literally walked knee deep through the mound. And my friend that was air, they had a big observation tower, so you can go up and look at the whole shape. It's fascinating when you look at it on the internet. And so she's up at the top. She says, come up here and look and look and look. I tried to walk up, and I was told, no, that's not my element. Stay on the ground because I'm water. And would not let me go up. And then later, my friend tried to walk off the cliff because she saw what used to be there, the portal, and I had to grab her to keep her from walking off the cliff in the memory, because there was a vehicle that would come. It would come and it would hover at the edge of the cliff, and we'd walk back and forth that way. And that being her element, she tried to walk off off of the cliff. I don't know if she would have floated or not, but I wasn't going to take that chance.
I don't want to find out.
No. And then later we walked around, went down to the bottom where the water was, and I found a portal to Lemuria. And I started to walk into it, and she said I started to disappear, and she's grabbing my arm and pulling me back because I was trying to go back there to the portal.
The Lemuria?
Yeah. And then when we talked to the groundskeeper, we were explaining what we discovered, what we thought, this happened here, this happened here, this happened here. And he says, we've had geologists, we've had dowsers, we've had psychics, and they each pick up a piece of it. You're the first one that has picked it all up. And so that was, It was fascinating.
How fun.
But I really wanted to go through that portal. Really had. And I had buried a huge earth crystal right below the egg around the serpent's mouth.
So,
that reminds me of another story. I hope you don't mind my rambling.
No.
There is a place probably 30 miles north of where I live right now. It is actually a rice field. But I had a friend who said, I saw something out in that field when he was driving home from Chico because that's where he worked. I saw something out in the field and I want you to go see what it is. And so, being me, sounded like a great idea. We had a little sedan car and 6 or 8 of us piled in and drove up and stopped on the road. And he says, it was out in that field. I said, oh, I know this place. So I started walking out, and they hadn't planted. It was bare ground at that time. And I said, but you need to stay here. You can't follow me across the field, because if you do, the groundskeepers, this was probably 15 years ago. So I guess I was about 60. I don't know. I said, there are 2 groundskeepers, earth elements, that if you walk in their land while I've got the door open, they'll hurt you. And so I was excited to see them because I had planted a crystal there and I had put them in charge of the property. And so they were old friends, very, very old friends. And I had them stay where they were on one end of the field, and I walked to the other, and they tell me I disappeared. And they waited, and they waited. And in the meantime, I was talking to these 2 guardians, and, the best you can with big beasts, hugging and loving on them, kind of like that, whatever that cartoon is, where the monsters are supposed to be bad, but the little girl's loving on them. And they were telling me what they had done. And I said, yeah, and it's still right that you stay here. And thank you for guarding the crystal and the land. And I finally turned around and walked out. And when I walked out, they started yelling and screaming, my friends. And they said, you're back. We didn't know what we were going to do. You were just gone. And so I had walked into a different dimension. And they knew me enough that they knew it was 90% sure I was coming back, but I was gone, I guess, about a half hour. And that was long enough to get them really afraid. Do I have any advice? Be honest with yourself. That's the advice. What you see, test it for truth or test it for not truth. Okay, for everybody that's out there, I'm going to give you a little exercise that I do with my clients when we get started so that they can determine for themselves, because I'm not the giver of whether it's true for you or not. I make recommendations and suggestions, but you decide. Either it's true for me, and you accept it, or it's maybe I'll put it in the closet, or it's not true at all for me and throw it away. So for anybody that's listening, take a moment, close your eyes, and you're going to say something true, which is your name. And you'll say it out loud. When I ask you to say it out loud, pay attention to your body. You'll have a truth indicator. It might sound like a bell. You might have a feeling in a certain part of your body. Whatever the sensation, pay close attention. So right now, say, my name is, and tell the truth. Go ahead, try it, Julie.
We've done this exercise on the phone.
I know.
My name is Julie Ann Guthrie-Smulson.
And you already found your truth spot. So what is it for you?
My truth spot? My heart.
Yeah. Your heart, and what does it do? How does it feel?
Feels like there's a band of energy around it.
Yeah. And so when you want to identify whether something's true or not, you ask. Now, for everybody else, because I know Julie's done this. When I say to, you are going to say, my name is Albert Einstein. And pay attention to how your body feels where there is a sensation. Ah, thank you. Wherever there is a sensation, pay attention to it because it's your lie indicator. So now close your eyes and say out loud, my name is Albert Einstein.
My name is Albert Einstein.
And how does that feel?
It's in my gut. Low in my gut.
Yeah. Is it a clenching or a burning or what is it?
A little clenching, or I'd call it like a little cramp.
Okay. So when you're not sure of something, give it that truth indicator. And as you're on a spiritual journey, I also use kinesiology, testing for yes or no. And between those two things, using the kinesiology and using my truth indicator, I know where it is right for me to be studying, looking, listening, what is true for me today, what I need to set on the shelf and think about later.
Mm-hmm.
And as you go through, that guides you as to what topics to study. And it lets you know what people to be around. Probably, Julie, when you walk into a room where there are negative people, you probably get something in your gut that feels that way. That's your lie indicator. That means that there's something not right there. And when it is beautiful people, your heart opens up.
Mm-hmm.
You're automatically using it. This is just reminding people how to do that.
Right. Because we're not in our bodies, we're in our heads a lot of the time.
Yeah, we aren't paying attention. And in my book, The Living Energy Systems, it's like an encyclopedia of all the subtle bodies. One of the systems I was told about by my guides, I investigated, and being a drafter, cartographer, I drew and described, because I'm good at technical writing too. This is not our mind, it's our brain, and it's the gateway to our mind. But our mind is actually in like two pyramids set base to base at the heart. And they have different quadrants, different components, and that's where our soul memories are. That's where our true identification is. And so we're in our mind when we're out here, we're in our brain, which is the gateway and has the computer components, but all the internet stuff is out here that gets us to our guides and to our high soul self.
Right. Well, we're going to wrap up the show here. And where do you...
Wow.
Yeah, by that quick. It's been a good time, right?
Yes, it is. Including the questions. Thank you. Get me off traffic from what Julie wanted, but too bad.
That's right. He wants to run the show. What was I going to ask you? Oh, boy.
For relief,
what? I want to know where you help people. What area in people's lives do you help them right now? That's your focus.
It seems like most of my clients, it's either relationships or career. Those seem to be the two biggest areas. But as you can tell, spiritual growth, I'm mentoring about 4 or 5 people right now on their spiritual journey. I'm sort of a one-stop-fits-all. I can't come up with another term. A gentleman that's interviewed me on the radio before calls me a Renaissance woman because I do so much.
Right.
So
You are very eclectic as well. You've written, how many books have you written?
I think I've written 5 of my own, and I'm in 6 anthologies.
I think we're in one of them, at least one.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was Jill's, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I did 3 or 4 with Jill. I've done it through U.S. Psychotronics Association. I did one through Magical Blend.
Yeah. It's this one
a
right
few.
here. It's Reading Between the Signs, Anthology of Signs and Synchronicities.
Yeah, and I think that's the one where I've got the story of Enoch in it. My guide, my major guide.
That was a fun book signing. Okay. What we kind of skip around here. So what modalities do you use to help people?
Direct readings. I use cards. I use guided meditations for either dream work or regression therapy. I do talk. I do body work. When someone has, like I've done couples counseling, and when people come in and they're going to be working with me for a period of time, like one of my clients right now that I've actually taken back even through the COVID, each time we talk or we work, it's about using a different technique. I might give her a direct reading, or I might counsel using the mindset work and, the psychology and those things that I know, or I might be doing body work. So I check to see what is most appropriate for that person at that time. I ask them to come up with what they think they want, and then we discuss what we will do. One time we might be doing, okay, this is a family history so that we can see what the patterns are and work it out. That's very logical, pragmatic. And another time I might be helping them contact their guides and get some information. It's just what is appropriate for the person at the time, because my toolkit is pretty big.
Absolutely. Way bigger than mine right now. So.
No, yours is focused. And there have been times when I was really focused like that, but I've just expanded over time. Your story is fascinating.
Well, thank you. And thank you for being on tonight. And I hope you come back and share some more stories. I know you're probably going to be working on another book soon.
Yeah, I think I'm going to work on the one about what happens between death and rebirth. But I've got Post-it notes of idea stories everywhere, so who knows?
Right. Just like the rest of us writers.
Yeah. And I've got like 3 stories started, it's always that way. You're a delight. I'm very glad to have connected with you, Julie. Very special soul.
Thank you.
You've got a lot that you're doing, and I really appreciate and support who you are.
Well, thank you so much. Good night, all.
Good night. Blessed.